Shall we open our Bibles to Leviticus chapter 11? In chapter 11, I just want to tell you now, it's going to be kind of a bizarre chapter, so just hang in there. And it's a good chapter, but the book of Leviticus is definitely a tough book, there's no doubt. But I think when it comes to a life of worship, I think worship is tough. I think oftentimes we do really well talking and fellowshipping and eating. I don't think we do very well worshiping and concentrating on things from the Lord. So when you come to a people like the nation of Israel, God had to teach them. Now remember, these people had never fought. They were slaves for all their lives, mostly. And now when they came out, God was going to have to redo their lives, just like us. We come off of drugs, we come off of all the things we've been through, and God has to completely redeem our lives. He did with me. And so what happened when I came off of drugs, my mind was gone. And I remember one day, so sad, I was in a doctor's office trying to read, and I couldn't make sense of it. And the reason why is it was in Spanish. I didn't get that. You know, I was just brain dead. In fact, it was upside down. I was really messed up. And it just took time for God. I don't know if God's really healed me at all. I don't know. But anyway, God finally did something. And but God began to do a work. Well, the same here. They came out of Egypt. They had to trust God, go through the Red Sea, and then they had to fight. They've never picked up a weapon before, and it was through prayer that they were going to win. But what was really important was God was now going to teach them about miracles and about obedience. And so for God to teach them, he was going to have to lead them in some tough ways. So you remember in, I think it is Deuteronomy 8:2, he led you these 40 years in the wilderness to prove you, to try you, to see what's in your heart. Three things. He wanted to show you what was in your heart. He knew what was there. He wanted to prove you and test you. In other words, God wanted to reveal the strength that you thought you had, you didn't have. So he led them to the Red Sea. They were trapped. They thought they were trapped. God was going to have to open the Red Sea and therefore teach them a lesson that from this point on, God was going to have to open a Red Sea. God was going to have to open the Jordan River. God was going to have to destroy the army. God was going to have to take down Jericho. From that point on, God was going to teach them a life of faith. And they were going to have to cross over the Red Sea by faith. And I can just have a great picture. I see like Jaws, you know, right there, dun, 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 and the people are walking through, and these sharks are looking at them, and, you know, maybe a bucket of water hits them every once in a while. And it wasn't like an easy walk. It was like, let's get across as quick as we can. And so it was dry land because the Lord opened it with his right nostril, and just kind of opened up. They went across. And so at the very end, all the enemy was, completely wiped out. But then they complained because there was no water. And so they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die? We want to go back to the onions and everything else. So the children of Israel had a real problem trusting people and trusting God. Well, the same with us. We go out like the 12 spies, and we see everything negative. We don't see very many things positive in our life. Well, there were two, Caleb and Joshua. They saw things right. And because of that, they were able to go through the wilderness for 40 years, the judgment, and they made it. The others all died. And so now we come to the same situation that God has redeemed them. God's beginning to work in their life. He's building a nation. He's building a priesthood. And he's going to teach them the importance of, once again, day-by-day stuff. So you would skip over chapter 11. There's no doubt in my mind. I would too. But the reason I believe there are some great benefits to chapter 11, it teaches you, number one, that God does have a purpose and God does have a plan. And sometimes we don't understand it. It seems just like, oh, we got to do this again today. Well, every day you're going to have to work 8 hours a day. Every day for Monday through Friday, you're going to have to get up and do it all over again. Well, that becomes kind of boring. You can't. You have to do it with joy in your heart. The other thing we're going to find out is with the new order, basically, there had to be a new sacrifice. In Leviticus chapters 1 through 7, they were going to have to sacrifice a sin offering and the burnt offering and the consecration offering, 5 different offerings. So that was number one. But then to do that, they had to have a priesthood. So that's chapters 8 and 9. And God now was instructing Moses how to do the priesthood. And chapter 10, because of the death of Abihu and Nadab, they had to be instructed one more time. And so the great instruction. And then in verses 11 through 15, there was now to be the dedication. So there is to be the sacrifice, there is to be the priesthood, and there is to be the instruction, but mostly there is to be the dedication. And so in verse 11, we come to clean and unclean animals. Clean and unclean animals. Probably for hygiene would be number one. Secondly, probably culture. For instance, we know that the pig was not able to be eaten. Many still to this day don't know why. But there's a possibility because it was offered in the Canaan religion, and also it was offered in Babylon. So that might be a possibility. And also the killing of animals like birds of prey, which is profound. Like, why couldn't you eat a bird of prey? Because they were killers. They would eat the blood of other animals. So you had certain animals that you could eat, and certain ones you couldn't eat, and ones that chewed the cud, and ones that didn't, and ones that had the right type of feet, and one that didn't. And you think, no, why? What's this all about? Well, there's a reason for it, and I hope to be able to explain it. And then in chapter 12, you're going to have the purification of women. When they go through that time of month, the purification, how once again they're cleansed. In those days, it was really bad, because once a woman started her period, no one could touch her. She couldn't sit anywhere. Anything she sat on was not pure. I mean, it was really, you talk about being embarrassed now. I mean, back then, it was like everyone knew you had the period. It was terrible. And so it was, when it was all said and done, then you had to go be sanctified and cleaned and everything else. And because it was real important, because it had to deal with blood. And that's not because of women, it's just because of blood. Blood had a problem, and everything is bloody in the religion of Christianity. And then in chapter 13, the test for leprosy, how you're going to deal with it. And then the cleansing of a leopard in chapter 14. And then the purifying of a home in chapter 15. So you're going to have some major dedications. And I think that what God is going to teach us in a very simple way, and thank God we'll get done with this tonight, but never be overwhelmed at details with God. Because when God begins to lay out certain details, there's a lesson you're going to have to learn. And the lessons are going to be pretty profound. And so it's all going to fit together. When I look at so far, I understand there had to be a sacrifice to get me in. And there had to be a priest to get me to the sacrifice. And then there had to be the cleansing or the purity. And what happened in chapter 10 is that we had the sacrifice, then we educated the priesthood, and then we had the major sin, and God killed the two priests. Because it was now going to establish the priesthood as corrupt. The nation would be corrupt, then the world would become corrupt. And so God took these two young men because their lives were not pleasing to God at that moment. And so you're going to learn some rules do not always apply certain ways. In other words, these rules do not apply right or wrong, but what they do teach is kind of interesting. They teach the importance of understanding what God says is right and what God says is wrong. Now, if God says you can gather the manna 6 days a week, but on the seventh day don't gather it, what did people do? They went out on the seventh day and gathered it, and it stunk. Well, why did it stink? Because God wanted everyone to know how selfish you were and disobedient. God said that he would make it last for 2 days, but no one really believed that. Some did, most of the people didn't. So they would cheat. They go out and gather it. The same thing happened with the land. Work it 6 days, on the seventh, let it rest. Work it 6 years, on the seventh year, take a whole year off, and don't worry about it. I'll help you. Did people do that? No. The Jews worked it every single year for 490 years, and God said, I think I want my payday. And so you divide 7 into 490, you come out with 70. How long were the children of Israel in captivity in Babylon? 70 years. God always gets back what we take from him. And so when I look at this, I begin to see the priests were in charge. The priests were in charge for the details. They had to understand what would be clean and what would be unclean. And I think today in ministry, that's extremely important for pastors and once again, worship leaders, to be able to discern, to be able to know what God wants you to do and what God doesn't want you to do. There's nothing worse than having a pastor or a worship leader confused about what God wants in his life. We need to know. And between the clean and the unclean is really to protect them from destruction. And what makes an animal clean and unclean, the animal's world, is divided into three. And to this day, we still use it. There's the flying in the air in Genesis 1:20. And God said, "Let the water bring forth abundantly moving creatures that have life, and the birds that may fly in the earth." And so there is the flying in the air, those birds. Second, there is the walking on the land. In Genesis 1:25, you're going to see the cattle and those that are walking on the land. And third, you're going to find those that swim in the sea. So those are the three areas of zoology, the animal world, that we're going to look at today. Those that fly in the air, those that swim in the sea, and those that walk on the land. And three forms are moving. Birds, 2 wings to fly and 2 feet to walk. Fish, fins and scales. And then the land animals, hoofs, and to run. And so if it jumped, you could eat it. If it crawled, you couldn't eat it. Real simple. You say, well, it doesn't make much sense to me. Well, if you can pick it up real easy, you can't have it. If it ate other animals, you couldn't have it. If it was a meat eater, you couldn't have it. And if it was something that ate dead animals, like at the bottom of the ocean, like a lobster, you couldn't have it. Now, you could, but you might get real sick because they didn't have the refrigeration we do. But again, there are bacterias that when you get a halibut or you get a lobster, they're eating all those little dead things at the very bottom of the ocean. If you know lobsters, you see miles of them just string on the very bottom, eating anything that's dead. Sharks eat anything that's dead. And they don't have fins. If it has fins and scales, I should say, it's okay. Trout's okay. Certain things are okay with scales. They are not meat eaters. They eat live things. And so there's not the bacteria. And so clean animals, and once again, pure animals, and on and on and on. So let's dive into this and take a look at it. It does become a little bit interesting as you look at it. Chewing the cud here in the hoofs are animals that you may eat. That would be like the ox, the sheep, and the goat. What you could not eat is a camel, a horse, or a zebra. Now, I wouldn't want to eat that either. I think camels are the ugliest thing, and I think cooking them would make them even uglier. So, camels are out, horses are out, zebras out. So in Leviticus 11, chapter 11, verse 1 through 8, it tells you about this. "And the Lord spake to Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals or the beasts which you may eat among the beasts of all the earth." Now, does God have a plan? He sure does. Is God into certain things? He is. Is God into detail? You bet your life. What do we accuse him of? God, you don't care. So the first lesson I realize is if God's going to make sure that I eat the right things, and I don't eat the right things, and the reason why is because they have a certain foot or not a foot, or they chew the cud or they don't chew the cud, there's reasons for that. So why do I, in my wisdom, question God, why he does things? I would have to say that the reason I'm being dealt with is because I've dropped the ball, I haven't followed through, I didn't pay attention, I didn't listen. So what this helps me to understand is that I need to really tune in. I really need to pay attention when it comes to the things of God. He says in verse 3, "Whosoever parteth the hoof lives on the land," so we're talking about animals on the land, "is a cloven foot, and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall you eat. Nevertheless," so a pig doesn't have that, where cows do. "Nevertheless, these shall you not eat, those that chew the cud, that do not have divided hoofs." The camel, right here, because he chews the cud, but the dividing of the hoof is unclean unto you. So the rock badger in verse 5, the coney, we think that's maybe the rock badger, because he cheweth the cud, but divides. Now, the chewing of the cud is a cool thing. You think, what are you talking about? Well, when you look at that from a meditation, when a cow would chew the cud, then he swallows it in one stomach. And then later on during the day, when he's real hungry, he throws it back up and chews it again and drops it in the other stomach. You think, oh man, you just took away my appetite. Well, I would hope so. Otherwise, you're going to get up and go home and eat. But that's what it means to chew the cud. In an animal or a cow, you have 2 stomachs. And so you just scarf, and then through the day, you kind of burp it back up and then swallow it back into the good stomach, and it gives you strength. So it was a way that they would retain. Now, we kind of do that, but we just stuff ourselves with 17 hot dogs and we kind of bloat all day. We don't have that ability to do it. So they did it to grab everything, and then through the day they would eat gradually. And so that's like meditation. So when you hear that about how certain animals do it, so we take the Word of God and then we bring it back up, we chew it, we drop it back down, we go out. And so it's just always chewing the Word of God, always bringing it up. So it's a gross thing to us, but it was not a gross thing back then. It's the way an animal is built. And so you look at a camel, they can go forever without water. They're able to store it. But a camel and a badger you could not eat. And a hart or a rabbit, verse 6, because he cheweth the cud, but divides not the hoof, he is unclean. And the swine, though divided the hoof and cloven foot, yet he cheweth not the cud. So it means, well, if one does one, does the other one? No, wait a second. You mean if he chews the cud and has the right feet? Well, how about this? If you're going to talk it, walk it. That's what I would think. That's what he's saying here. If you're going to chew the cud, then you have to have the right type of feet. So if I'm going to talk it, I need to walk it. And you can look at it that way, or you can just say, God, you really want me to listen. Because if I'm not going to listen, I'm going to fall in sin. I'm going to eat the wrong stuff. Now, how many times do we not listen? I mean, if there's anything that I could teach you today, it's about ethics, about morals, about paying attention, about listening. So we come in here, we kind of listen, but we're thinking about other things. We go to real estate board, we pay some money, we take a piece of paper out, we jot down everything. We don't miss a word because we want to become wealthy. Well, we're paying attention. Your wife starts to talk to you. Are you listening? Well, kind of. Your boss is talking. Do you really listen? Or are you playing with the phone? I tell you what, you better listen. And if you're a great listener, you're going to go great ways in your life. You're going to stop most of the problems, because most of the people get fired because they don't pay attention and they give the impression that they know everything. So here, what God is saying is, if you don't pay attention, you're going to be eating the wrong stuff, and it's not going to be pleasing to me. And so here, verse 7, the swine, though it doesn't chew the cud, but it has the right type of feet, doesn't happen. You have to have both. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcasses shall ye not touch. They are unclean to you. So that's all it's saying. So a talk and a walk going together. And then those in the water, in verse 9 through 12, those with fins and scales, you can eat them. So you can enjoy the trout, other things, bonita, but the other lobster net, you can't do it. Now, today you can. And I think remember when Peter was there on top of the tanner's house, and the Holy Spirit was working in Peter's life, and he was a Jew, and he didn't want to go to the Gentiles. He had a dream. He dreamed that this sheet came down, and there was all these animals that he could not eat as a Jew. And so the Lord said, rise up and eat. And this is the great, great saying of Peter, not so, Lord. Now, how can you say that? If he's the Lord, how can you say no? Not so, Lord. And so he wouldn't do it. But then God spoke to Peter, what I say is clean is now clean. Well, what was God really doing in Peter's life? He is trying to show Peter that in a few moments, the door was going to be knocked on by a Gentile, and he was now going to go inside of a Gentile's house, which was unheard of in those days. But God gave him a dream saying, what I call clean is now clean. All these things were unclean. The Gentiles are unclean, but Peter, you've been called by God to stand before the Gentiles and the Samaritans and bring the gospel of Jesus Christ. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to walk in this house unless I give you a dream and tell you it's okay? And so sure enough, he woke up, and the door knocked and said, hey, my master Cornelius needs you to come over to the house. He led the whole family to Christ. So God will do some great things in your life. Those shall ye eat of all that's in the water, whatsoever have fins and scales in the water, in the sea, in the river, them shall you eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the sea, in the rivers, those are the ones you're not to eat. So a lobster doesn't have fins, and, those on and on and on. Halibut doesn't have fins. And any of these living things which is in the water, they shall be abomination to you. They shall be even an abomination to you. That's hard, because I like halibut, it's like a bummer. And you shall not eat their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses an abomination. Whatsoever has no fins nor scale in the water, that shall be an abomination. All he's saying is this: the ones that have scales and the ones that have fins do not eat dead things. That's all it's saying. So again, God is looking at the blood, and God's looking at that which destroys, and he doesn't want the bacteria. He just wants you to be healthy and not sick all the time. Now, things have changed, so we can take medication, so on, but that's what he's saying. Now, if you want the very best of life and don't want to get sick, then, be careful. With the lobster, be careful of that, because it's going to have bacteria. Then in verses 13 through 19, clean birds you can eat, and some of them are birds of you cannot eat the birds of prey. So here's what you can do in verse 13. And these are they which ye have in abomination among the fowls. You cannot eat the eagle, or once again the vulture, or the buzzard. Now, I don't want to eat any of those personally. But again, why? And many people believe it's because these are the ones that kill. Falcon is an unbelievable bird, 180 miles an hour. Just destroys a bird in midair. But they eat the blood, and they eat the blood out of the things. And God was trying to establish something. Do not touch the things that kill other things. And there's a value here, I think, too. In other words, if all I do is kill life, just to kill life, that's no good. If all I'm doing is throwing away life, that's no good. So when I see something, and there's a law that God was trying to establish among the people of Israel, saying, listen, you need to eat that which is good, but you need to understand that the things that you're eating are not killers. And so you think, no, wait, what are you trying to teach me here? Well, it could be a deep thing, as much as you have to be careful, because this blood, you have to have a value of life. You have to respect the blood. Well, Cain didn't respect it. Well, we don't respect it today. We have millions and millions of babies dying, and that's the problem of our country. He goes on to say in verse 14, the vulture, and once again, every raven of the kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the seagull, and the hawk after the kind. These are all birds of prey. And the live oak, little oak, and the large blackbird, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gear eagle, which we believe to be another type of a vulture, and the stork, and so on. These are all ones that you can't, and even the bat you can't eat. Well, I don't want these. I would rather have a steak. So, again, why? I don't know why. I can tell you what I think, but why? I came Sunday night to hear this. Yeah, you did. Well, let me put it another way. If you don't pay attention to the tools you're working with, you're going to get hurt really bad. I am a carpenter. My trade's carpentry. I've done finish and carpentry. I've framed houses. And I've seen guys rip their leg up and have 57 stitches because they didn't pay attention. Because when the saw is being used, it's a worm drive. It goes backwards, comes up towards you. So you see them twisting, or you see them chopping with, a chop saw, and they always hold the wood with their left hand for some reason and come down with it. Well, it's going to cut your hand off. And I told the guy, you're going to cut your finger off, and he cut his finger off right there in front of me. Bam! Couldn't believe it. Or you're pushing something through the table saw, and you don't pay attention, and all of a sudden it kicks back and goes right through your stomach. I've seen that. I've seen horrible accidents, or even shooting things into the wall. Listen, what about it? That thing ricochets and went right back and went right through the guy's stomach. There are horrible things, or a guy going too fast and stapling his foot to the ground. I'm sure you guys have done that. So, Steve, why are you telling us this? Because I love you. I don't want to see you get hurt. Well, we are carpenters. It doesn't make a difference. You're lazy sometimes. You're kind of sloppy. You've been working all day. You're out in the heat, and all of a sudden, you go too fast and put a nail through your head. It happens. Happens all the time. So it'd be like me sitting down at an OSHA thing saying, okay, this is going to help you not to die. Pay attention. Or you get a traffic ticket, right? And you have to go watch what? All these crashes, all these people dying, no heads and everything else. Why? They're trying to get through your thick head. Not that you have a thick head, but through your thick heads. Pay attention. Or you have a wife and you're not taking care of her, and people are saying, if you don't stop it, you're going to end up in a divorce. And she'll never leave me. You come home, there's a note on the table. Adios, amigos. I'm out of here. What happened? You didn't pay attention. Or what about your face breaking out? Oh, I don't know why you're filled with all types of anxiety, eating jelly donuts all the time. Stop it. Pay attention to your body. We don't do it. So I think that sometimes we make things too spiritual. When God says it, that's all there is to it. If you are going to start flirting, it's because you're looking. If you're looking, it's because you want, and then you take. But it really starts with a thought. The thought turns into that moment of lust. And when you begin to look at her and she looks at you and you get excited and she gets excited and you're winking and she's winking, and you don't realize she has a wink problem, but, she has a little stigma in her eye. She's not winking at you. She thinks you're really ugly to begin with. But she's winking and you're winking back and you have a wedding ring on. What are you doing? So God is into the attitude, not the action. He's into the motive, not how you're going to end up with this thing. You have to be careful. And the same thing with being a police officer. You have to wear your vest. Why? Because you're going to get shot in the chest. Same with a pastor. You have to realize you can't be counseling women. Let it go. Let someone else do it. So there are things in life that you have to pay attention to. Now, you can have pizza at night, but every single night, you're going to die with all kinds of corks in your stomach and everything else. And then we're all going to have to pay for it. No, stop it. Or how overweight you have to get. 800 pounds, stop it. I'm overweight. I need to lose weight. I need to stop eating it. I got hung up in peanut butter and lately and apples. And oh, my goodness. I don't know why. I just got these peanut butter down at Whole Foods, and then dip the apples in. Oh, my goodness. I almost get excited. I want to worship. I just get really... I went through 3 of them. Gail was gone. I had 3 apples and almost a half a thing of... Anyway. But is that good for me? Well, here's how I think. An apple is good for you. And peanuts are very healthy for you. It's not junk food. Well, Stephen, a whole pound of peanut butter? I have gout. Well, yeah. You eat too many peanuts, you're going to get what? Gout. Well, I have almost sugar diabetes. What are you eating, that popsicle? Well, just kind of a needle or a popsicle. What do you want? Neither. There you go. So when you go home tonight, what are you going to have? Whatever I want. Okay. So if you throw up tonight, don't call me. Behave yourself. Don't do that to your body. Okay, so you get the point. And then we have verse 13 through 19, the birds that you can eat. And these are they which you shall have an abomination among the birds. Or we did that, the buzzard and so on, the seagull. And verse 20 through 23, flying insects. This is kind of cool. Now, I hate insects personally. I have O negative, which is only 4% in the world have it. And I kind of believe in my spirit that I have a sign saying Starbuck on my back. Because my wife can be there, not one mosquito. I have 100 mosquitoes around me. They're just sucking me dry. Those that you can and can't eat. If it swarms, you can't eat them. Well, usually they're flies and so on. So all the fowls, the creeping things, verse 20, that going up all four, so all four, shall be an abomination to you. Yet these may you eat of every flying, creeping thing. Now they're creeping, but you can eat them. That goeth up on 4, which have legs above their feet. So they have the big legs. The grasshopper, you can do that. So in verse 22, the long, smooth-head grasshopper, the locust. And then the green locust, sometimes called the cricket. And then you can have the desert locust. And so I want to do a movie like, hey, we're having locust tonight. We have green locust, we have the desert locust, or the long, smooth-head locust. And you can dip that in honey, and you can put a little bit of cinnamon on top. It's pretty good. Kind of crunchy. You can have that. Doesn't that sound exciting? And God's saying, this is really good for you guys. But all other flying, creeping things you can't have. Why? Because their legs are even, and they walk. They don't jump. Crickets jump every 4 feet. Boom, they jump. They're only touching the ground every 3 feet. Every other one is walking, picking up all the germs. So again, just hygiene. Then in verse 24 through 40, water vessels of people. So this is good. I said I was cracking up this morning, but it says when you have to relieve yourself, take your shovel and go outside the camp. And go find some place and have a moment, dig a hole and bury it. Well, do I have to? Yes. If you walk your dog, pick it up. Why? Because flies are all over the place. It's your dog pooping on somebody else's yard, pick it up. Well, I trained my dog to do that. Well, no. Would you want him to do that to you? Well, no. Well, don't do that to him. Respect, appreciation, honesty. Well, I'm going to throw it out the window. Why? Not in my city, you're not. Well, I don't live here. You do live here. You live in this world. There's a stewardship. You have a responsibility. When you pull up to a cop, you don't speed up. You could get shot. You respect him. Well, I don't want to respect him. You respect him because they're angels of God. So there's this rebellion in our spirit, this rebelliousness that comes out. And so we rise up against our boss. We rise up against authority. Why? What are you doing? This is a time you can't find jobs. What are you doing? He's not asking you to do anything wrong. He's just asking you to be at work on time. You ought to be there early just to be a witness. Oh, really? Uh-huh. You ought to be the most valuable employee in the world. Oh, you ought to be producing more. But why are we not producing? Because we're thinking about what we really want to do down the road. This is where God has you. Do it for the glory of God. Whatever you do. And same with me. So flying insects, and then the people here in verse 24. And for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever touches the carcass of it shall be unclean. So what happened with Samson in the book I wrote, crossing the line, I shared with you. He was a Nazarene. He was not to drink. He was not to touch anything that was dead. And he was not to cut his hair. What did he do? He picked up the jawbone of a donkey and killed 1,000 men. Well, he would have killed 1,000 men without that jawbone, but by touching that dead animal, he violated God. Secondly, he was always hanging out in the vineyard. What's he doing in the vineyard? He took the Nazarene vow. He's flirting. And what is this with his hair? Oh, if you braid it up this way, you braid it up that way, he's flirting with it. He's going to lose everything. And he did. He lost his eyes, lost his ministry, wasted his life. 20 years of his life wasted. And he was made by God to set a nation free. But he chased foxes, tied 300 of them together, and lit their tails on fire. And he chased the Philistine women. He took the gates off and took them all the way up because he got caught with a prostitute. The man was out of control. Why? Because he was disobedient. Why? Because God told him not to do it. I'm going to do it. Not with God, you're not. More men have been disqualified, not because of women, but because of attitude. Not because of anything else but anger. The way they treat each other is wrong. Their gossip, their bitterness over the pulpit. And so all the birds, so on. In verse 23, the things that you can eat. And then verse 24, verse 25, and whosoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. So there are certain consequences. The carcass of every beast which divideth the hoof is not cloven foot, nor cheweth the cud, are unclean unto you. Every one that touches them shall be unclean. So what's he saying? Just don't touch it. If you know that God doesn't want you to eat it, God doesn't want you to touch it. Now why? I don't know. There's a great book I would encourage you to get. It's called None of These Diseases. It's out of print, but it's a great book. You can get it. Get on Amazon. None of These Diseases. But it talks about this stuff. But here we know that vultures, they're eating other animals that are just filled with all kinds of insects and diseases. And we know that all these other birds are eating other birds. And here you have a situation, you're touching it. Well, you're not to touch the rat. Go get some things and pick it up. But don't show off picking up the tail of a rat. That's bubonic plague. Don't do that. But we just, God can show you, I'm not afraid. It's not about being afraid. It's about being stupid. You know? Hey, there's a black little cat with a stripe going down its middle. Oh, really? Yeah, let's go pet it. Go ahead. Then you find out it's a skunk, and you have knowledge, but you have no wisdom. And whatsoever, verse 27, goeth upon the paws, among all the manner of beasts that goes on all four, these are unclean unto you. those that touch not, bears and so on. And he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes. So you can get out of it. It's just going to make you unclean. And again, hygiene. Now, we know for a fact that early in medical history that thousands of women lost their babies because of doctors. Until finally one day a doctor realized that they were going from the morgue to the delivery room without washing their hands. Way back. He figured it out, went ahead and started washing his hands, and didn't lose any after 6,000 births. Everyone else was losing them, like every 50 kid, one was dying. But he was mocked, he was just ridiculed, and he finally died. But now, guess what? You cannot touch something dead and go into an operating room. You have to suds up. And I told you before, I finally went and got the 3 shots. Hepatitis A, B, and C, what every doctor takes. Why? Because I shake thousands of people's hands. Do you not have faith? I have faith, but I'm not going to be stupid. I'm not going to sit there, don't touch me, don't touch me. I see those runs on your hands, don't touch me. I'm just going to shake a hand. I don't care. But I'm also going to be wise. So I believe that most sickness is because you touch something and then you pick your eye or do the other thing, your nose. And bam, that's it. That's all it takes because it has entry into your body. So what do? You wash your hands. You deal with chicken, what do? You wash everything. You don't cut a chicken and then go cut a lemon. That's why I never have lemon when I go out, because I don't know what knife they use to cut that. And most of the sickness comes from the lemon, not from anything else, because that meat there. So you have to divide it. You can't just do both. You can't have chicken and then put meat on top of it, because it's almost like poison. You have to handle a chicken completely different than you do any other animal. And you have to make sure everything's washed and everything's suds down, and otherwise you're going to get really, really sick. And you have to make sure that when you do the dishes, you really rinse them. Otherwise, you have diarrhea. So there's certain things we know. Well, when you get done shaking hands or you get done, wash your hands. Now, don't be paranoid about it. Don't have plastic over your hands and everything else. Just don't touch your face. You hit this way. But don't be sticking it in the eyes and everything else. So it's just common sense, and you know that. These also are unclean. Verse 30, the lizard, or maybe the crocodile, we're not sure. And then the rat, definitely dangerous. These are unclean. Verse 32, and whatsoever any of them that are dead does fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood or remnant or skin or whatever it might be. Just don't touch anything that's dead. Even the earthen vessels wherein anything has fallen in. So here you're drinking a cup and you find a fly fell into it. Well, you could be a mountain man and knock it out. But just remember, every time a fly lands, it does 2 things. It throws up and poops. So I don't think you want to do that. So I tell you what, get rid of that. Go get another cup. No, I'm a tough guy. I'll see you tonight, about 8 hours later. See how tough you really are. Because I've had dysentery, and it's a nasty thing. It's just terrible. And everything, verse 35, upon the part of these carcasses fall upon, whether it be an oven or a range or a pot, they shall be broken down. So if all of a sudden you find that, you have a bunch of things going on inside your oven, what are you going to do? Oh, it's okay, we'll cook it. No, take time. If you don't, I guess let me put it this way. If God's giving you a car and you don't check the oil and you blow the engine, you can't believe that you did it. Well, you did do it. God gave you a stewardship. That means you have to check the oil. That means weekly you have to check the oil. Are you kidding me? No. That means you have to check the tires. Why? Because you're going to buy tires twice as fast. So if you have to do that with your wife, have to do that with a tire, you have to do that with your oil, how about you have to do that with your whole life? You take care of things. And that means your kids don't understand why you're gone, and your wife doesn't understand why you never come home, and the boss doesn't understand why you're late all the time, but in your mind, in your heart, everything's fine. Doesn't work that way. Ethics is what my degree's in, is that there's a cause and effect. If I do this, it's going to happen. If I bless people, God's going to bless me. If I curse people, they're going to curse me. The way I treat you is how you're going to treat me. And that's what the Bible said. So details are extremely important. Some people say, well, I don't really care about details. Really? Only the details you like. So if you want to buy a car, you want to buy a boat, then you really take your time. But everyone else's detail is not important. That's not a man. That's not a woman. That's a selfish person. So if my kid if we're going to move to a city, I need to look into the school. If I'm homeschooling, I need to find a church. I have to take time at things. I just can't throw things together. I have to be responsible. And if God's made me a manager, I have to be kind. Otherwise, God will give it to somebody else every single time. And here we have in verse 36, nevertheless, a fountain or a pit. Again, if it falls into it, be careful. And so you have water around the house. My wife goes crazy. Hey, this water's been sitting here. There's lava. Get rid of it. Put chlorine in it, so on. But if any water, verse 38, be put upon the seed, and any part of the carcass falls thereon, it shall be unclean unto you. Don't tempt the things of nature. And then finally in verse 41 through 45, some simple rules. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. That's just honestly. Now, there's been people who have eaten crickets and ants for protein and so on. Well, that's fine. But this is just what God said back to the children of Israel. Whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goes upon all fours, it is unclean. Why? A snake goes upon the belly. Now, actually, a snake's pretty good tasting. But it's the hygiene. It's the filth. It's the dirtiness. And what God is saying to me is very simply, Stephen, it's in these small things that if you do the small things really right, it's like tonight when I go home tonight, I have, 5 services? Well, tonight is 6 services with my wife. I got to take care of this woman. Well, what does she want to do? She wants to talk. What do I not want to do? Talk. So I'm already in trouble. So I sat outside my house for about 10 minutes and just say, God, fill me up and let me go have a great time with her. And when I walk through that door, she's waiting, apples and peanut butter. Rub my feet and tell me what your day was like. They just don't like me. I'm not going back no more. No, it's just like, this is what I did. I want to say to her, where were you? Well, she was here. So, but guess what? She's like a wife that has a little kid. Husband comes home. She's been talking guy all day. And she wants to talk to an adult. How you doing? And so you have no time to talk to her. So you have to kind of figure things out. And so it goes on to say, verse 43, and ye shall not make yourself an abominable thing with creeping things. Let's stay away from the creeping things. That'd be a good book, creeping things. Make yourself unclean and deadly. For I am the Lord your God, and ye therefore will sanctify yourself. Ye shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourself with any manner of creeping things that creep upon the earth. I don't know. I mean, wouldn't that be a good book? Creeping things with God. It's just a creeping thing. Don't touch it. Well, why? Who cares? If God says he doesn't want you to touch it, don't touch it. If God wants you to be sanctified, you're going to be sanctified. Why do we fight with God? Well, it just doesn't make sense. Well, I have to submit to him. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, how about this? If you would, God would bless you. And God would change you. And God would make you wealthy. You're kidding me. Sarah obeyed Abraham, and because of Sarah, Abraham became wealthy. Not because of Abraham, because of Sarah. So be careful you don't get too overboard here. In verse 45, I am the Lord that bring you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God, and ye shall therefore be holy, for I'm holy. So pay attention. Small details. It's the small things that destroy us. This is the law of the beast, or the animals, of the birds, of every living creature that moveth in the waters, the fishes, and of every creature that creeps upon the earth, to make, here's a whole story right now, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean. Do you think that sometimes God has you do things just because he wants to have you different? Do you think that God wants you to drive different and act different and be different because you're a Christian? Do you think that God maybe would have you not be selfish but be more giving? I think he would. So here, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean, between the beast that may be fat and eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. So when I read it in that sense, I'm saying, okay, I can live with that. If this is what you want, God, I don't really understand it, but I'll do it. If it crawls, I won't eat it, but if it jumps, I'm going to barbecue it. Fine, Stephen. But God, when I get to heaven, would you tell me why? Sure. How about, will you just be obedient? Now, how many times have you told your kids to do something and they want to know why? And what do you say? Just do it. I don't have to tell you everything. Do it. There's some things you don't have to know. Well, I can't serve that type of a God. Okay, you want to get in that game, huh? Well, why would God send you someplace you don't want to go? Why would God make you do something that you really don't want to do? He wouldn't do that. But I'll tell you this. There are things you're going to do in your life that you hate. It might be administration, it might be people, but you better learn how to do it for the glory of God. And you better learn to realize that you don't always get to do what you want. And if you're going to have a church this size, you have to do administration. You have to pay bills. It's a more of administration I've ever done my whole life. I'd rather just go preach on the street, but you can't have it that way now. So what am I going to do? I got two options: quit or grow up, or redefine, or redesign, whatever it might be. But to cop an attitude, that's terrible. I can't do that. To see that one of the major things in our life at home was I couldn't get the underwear washed. I was going through it, and we were getting upset. And I finally realized, you idiot. So I went down and bought 2 more packs of underwear. I solved the problem. I mean, I didn't have enough, and so I just missed when she would wash. And I think, why are you against me? Why do you hold back on me? She wasn't doing that. He says I couldn't get it in quick enough, and she wouldn't tell me when she. How about the gift of wisdom? Buy a few extra pair. Guess what? We haven't fought for 20 years over there. It's just common sense. But see, we don't do that. We don't use common sense. We think someone's talking about us. We think someone's using us. We think someone's after us when they're not. And then they're telling us what to do. Well, I think a boss can tell you what to do. You know? And maybe, just maybe, if I could not have that chip on my shoulder, I wouldn't be told what to do. I might be looked at as one who would be able to rule over people. So if you cop an attitude to little tiny things, you're never going to be great. Because everyone who becomes great had to micromanage one time in their life to get organized. And then they hire people to now do it. But if I won't do it, I'm never going to become great. There are things I don't want to do, I need to do for the glory of God. And the things I want to do, I have to do.